She is the most dazzling dancer in Paris, yet no one knows that every movement she makes is a cover for thieves. In the crowd, a hand silently lifts a nobleman's purse from his waist and passes it to an accomplice. Another hand is just about to reach for someone else's wallet, but it is suddenly noticed. The people remain lost in applause. Even the nobleman who has just been robbed is still captivated by her charm, smiling as he claps. But in the next second, the appearance of one man instantly steals everyone's attention. He is a hunchbacked man lurking in the shadows, secretly watching the beautiful Esmeralda dance. Quasimodo. He is the most sorrowful soul in The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo, and also a tragic figure in 19th century literary history. A man whose appearance is extremely ugly yet whose heart is purely kind. Let us step into today's film adaptation of a classic, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Today is April Fool's Day, and people are choosing the ugliest person in France. When people see Quasimodo, they excitedly push him onto the stage, and he instantly becomes the center of attention. His hunchback arches high. His head tilts to one side, one eye is crooked, and his grotesquely twisted face sends chills down the spine. Without any suspense, he is crowned the King of Fools, the ugliest man in France. People eagerly bring out a crown that symbolizes ugliness and trick him into wearing it. Quasimodo resists at first, his face filled with confusion and shyness, but when he sees himself wearing the crown and hears the crowd clapping and cheering, he cannot help but break into a wide smile. At that moment, he is immersed in applause and cheers, as if he has become the protagonist of the world. Completely unaware of the mockery and humiliation behind the laughter, he is lifted onto a throne by several young men, and the cheers of the crowd surge like waves. He does not realize that this is humiliation and ridicule. This is the brightest moment Quasimodo has ever experienced in his life. Absurd and laughable, yet deeply heartbreaking. 25 years ago, a baby still in swaddling clothes was left at Notre Dame Cathedral. His body was deformed, his face ugly, almost like a monster. People all rejected him, and in the end, Frollo took him in. On one hand, Frollo pitied him and gave him food and shelter. On the other hand, he disciplined him strictly, raising him in Notre Dame to become a bell ringer. He became familiar with every beam of the cathedral, every swing of its bells, and developed a deep attachment to Notre Dame. The unfortunate Quasimodo, at the age of 14, had his ears shattered by the ringing bells and became deaf. From then on, his soul fell into endless darkness. At this moment, Frollo, now the archdeacon, hears the laughter outside. He walks out and is confronted with this very scene. He immediately snaps Quasimodo's scepter and orders him to come down. Quasimodo lowers his head hesitantly, as if all the ugliness and loneliness have returned to him in that instant. He limps as he follows Frollo back to Notre Dame. At the same time, a priest brings Esmeralda into the cathedral. This is the second time Frollo has seen her. The first time was when the guards arrested her. The guards discover that her dancing is meant to make it easier for thieves to steal. Just as Frollo happens to pass by, when he sees the beautiful Esmeralda, her face both innocent and defiant, her panic laced with a wild vitality, she instantly captures Frollo's attention.
Bring her here.
Please. Please, I haven't done anything. I have no money. I must dance to eat, to live.
What is your name?
Esmeralda.
You are a gypsy.
They tell me so. I don't know.
She's a witch.
No! Save me.
Release her.
Although she gains her freedom, those thieves and ruffians have no intention of stopping. They force Esmeralda to keep dancing with all her strength. Esmeralda firmly refuses and is brought before Truillafu. She says, "If I keep dancing, I will definitely be taken away." But Truillafu replies that he saw the way the archdeacon looked at her, and he will not touch a single hair on her head. Then he slaps her hard across the face. With no other choice, the pitiful Esmeralda can only return to the stage and continue performing. But after being discovered by a priest, she is directly seized and brought back. The priest asks Frollo to give the order to send her to the Bastille. Esmeralda immediately falls to her knees at his feet. She says, "I swear by all that is sacred, I have never harmed anyone. Please let me go." Frollo allows her to stay in the cathedral, where she can receive sanctuary. Frollo places her in a small room in the bell tower. In the dim candlelight, he is gradually overtaken by desire, his fingers unable to resist lingering over Esmeralda's shoulder. Realizing the danger, Esmeralda turns and runs in terror. Frollo orders Quasimodo to bring her back at once. Quasimodo's deformed body, his rough arms, and his indistinct growls are more frightening to Esmeralda than the night itself. The moment she is caught by Quasimodo, she kicks and struggles wildly. crying out for help. Just as she falls into despair, a man rushes out to help, only to be knocked to the ground by Quasimodo. Fortunately, a night patrol officer hears her cries, draws his sword, and with a sharp command forces Quasimodo to retreat. At the instant Esmeralda turns her head, she freezes. The man who saved her is Captain Philippe of the Royal Archers. Under the light, he stands tall and handsome, like a prince from a fairy tale rescuing a princess. Esmeralda is captivated by him in an instant. When Philippe sees her beautiful face, he too is momentarily stunned. Still shaken, Esmeralda jumps off the horse and disappears into the night. Quasimodo is then seized by the soldiers. The man he knocked down, Pierre, is also dragged into the thieves' den. Trulifo demands that Pierre join them as a thief, or else he will be hanged. But first, he must pass their test. However, Pierre is clumsy, and not only does he fail to steal anything, he even knocks over a dummy. Seeing how useless he is, Trulifo decides to hang him immediately. According to an old custom among the lower classes of Paris, if a woman is willing to marry him before the execution, his life can be spared. Pierre is almost in despair. Just before the noose is placed around his neck, a voice calls out,
No! I will claim him.
He'll hang on the rope unless you take him as your husband.
I will take him.
Remove the noose!
Kind-hearted Esmeralda, still not recovered from her fear, steps forward bravely. Trulifo publicly declares that they are now husband and wife. Pierre is so moved that he is nearly in tears. At the moment Esmeralda reaches out to save Pierre, it is neither love nor impulse, but simply the natural kindness of a young girl. At this moment, her heart already belongs to someone else, the man who made her heart race for the first time.
The captain of the Royal Archers? You had better think twice. Well, he can have any woman he wants in Paris, and he frequently does.
You're lying.
I may be jealous, but I am not lying.
The next day, the captured Quasimodo is brought before the court. His mind is underdeveloped, and his hearing is severely impaired, so when faced with the judge's questions, he can only stand there blankly, his cloudy eyes filled with confusion. In the end, the judge slams the table in irritation and delivers the sentence. Quasimodo is to be publicly whipped. He is dragged to the center of the square. For the idle crowds of Paris, this is nothing less than a free theatrical performance, a monster being publicly flogged. Who would want to miss it? The whip cracks down again and again, tearing open his flesh. Quasimodo's face twists in agony as he lets out continuous cries of pain. Not only does no one sympathize with him, but the mocking laughter is even more piercing than the sound of the whip. People keep throwing garbage at him. He struggles to lift his head, and in the distance of the crowd, he catches sight of Frollo. That is the only person he considers family, and the only one he trusts. His eyes light up like a child's. He believes Frollo will save him, but Frollo only stands there coldly for a moment, does nothing, and then turns away. Quasimodo's hope is crushed mercilessly in that instant. His throat is dry and burning as he begs the crowd for a sip of water. Instead, people either mock him or throw water jugs at his face to humiliate him. Quasimodo's eyes fill with despair. At this moment, Esmeralda slowly walks onto the platform, opens her flask, and gently brings it to his lips. Like a mountain spring, it soothes his parched throat. It is a kindness he has never experienced before. He does not know how to express his gratitude, and can only respond in the most simple way. He awkwardly and devoutly lifts his head, trying to kiss Esmeralda's hand, but she is startled and drops the flask before running away. Her kindness not only melts Quasimodo's heart, but also awakens the long-dormant conscience of the onlookers. The crowd begins to applaud with emotion. Back in the bell tower, Quasimodo remains immersed in that brief yet burning tenderness. For the first time in his life, someone has looked at him without fear or disgust. Even if it is only for a moment, it is enough for him to relive it throughout the entire night in the empty bell tower. With tears streaming down his face, like a child who has been cherished, he keeps murmuring, "She gave me water to drink." A few days later, Captain Philippe comes to find Esmeralda. He arranges to meet her at a tavern that night. Pierre tries to persuade her not to go, warning that she will surely be treated as nothing more than a plaything. But love makes people numb. Esmeralda's heart has already been completely occupied by that armored, handsome knight. At the same time, Frollo is being driven nearly mad by jealousy. In order to obtain Esmeralda, he bribes Pierre with money, but Pierre reveals the truth. "Although she is my wife, I have never touched her." After hearing this, Frollo offers 40 gold crowns, hoping Pierre will deliver Esmeralda to Notre Dame. Pierre himself is also disturbed by jealousy at this moment. He tells Frollo that Esmeralda has fallen in love with Philippe, and reveals the location of their meeting that night. Consumed by jealousy, Frollo disguises himself and goes to the tavern. At this time, the two are inside confessing their feelings to each other. Philippe's smile carries a dangerous charm. His sweet words make Esmeralda even more certain of his love. She kisses him without hesitation. Esmeralda has never experienced such tenderness before. She asks Philippe what his faith is, and he replies, "My God, what does that matter?" She says, "I want to marry you." Philippe is startled, and he says, "I am already married." Her heart completely collapses in that instant. She turns to run away from this deceitful man. Suddenly, the door is burst open by a shadow. Frollo rushes in, and before anyone can react, a dagger is already driven into Philippe's back. Esmeralda lets out a terrified scream. Frollo, like a soulless phantom, disappears into the night. In the next moment, people rush into the room, only to see the fallen Philippe and the panicked Esmeralda. As a result, she is taken as the murderer and arrested. The next day, she is brought before the court. The tavern owner serves as a witness and identifies her as the killer. Esmeralda tries to explain to the judge.
There was someone else. He wore the garment of a monk.
Yes?
I could see him clearly.
Then who was it?
The Archdeacon.
The court will not record the prisoner's last statement.
Because she refuses to confess, the judge orders torture. The jailers step forward and force her delicate feet into heavy iron boots. The sharp pain causes her entire body to convulse, and she screams in agony as her vision begins to blur. In the shadows, a pair of terrifying eyes watches silently. Under unbearable suffering, Esmeralda is finally forced to confess. The court quickly declares the verdict: guilty of murder and witchcraft, to be executed by hanging. But the so-called victim Philippe is not dead at all. His so-called severe injury is nothing more than a superficial wound, and he has already recovered while resting in his residence. But in order to preserve his reputation as a noble officer, and driven by resentment after being rejected by Esmeralda, he chooses to remain silent the entire time. That night, Frollo secretly comes to the prison. Esmeralda recognizes at once that he is the man in black. She asks in pain what kind of hatred he holds against her, and why he would harm her like this. Frollo, with eyes full of passion, confesses his uncontrollable love for her, but Esmeralda feels nothing but disgust for his hypocrisy. Her eyes are filled with revulsion and fear as she shields herself, as if guarding something more precious than life itself. That is her untouched purity, the last strength that allows her to resist the endless darkness. At dawn the next day, Esmeralda is escorted by soldiers and pushed toward the execution ground. The crowd, like boiling filth, throws garbage and rotten leaves at her, erupting into cheers and vile curses as she passes. Those vicious words push her toward the abyss of despair. From the top of the tower, Quasimodo sees her, and his heart aches so deeply that he can barely breathe. He cannot understand why such a kind woman is treated this way. Pierre, filled with worry, follows closely behind, yet remains powerless. At this moment, Frollo approaches her in the guise of a savior.
Have you asked God to forgive you your sins? I can save you. Even now.
Esmeralda lifts her tear-streaked yet proud face and glares at him fiercely. She would rather die than accept such a condition for being saved. Frollo's face twists instantly. The executioner has already prepared the noose, just as Esmeralda is about to be pushed toward death. From the towering heights of Notre Dame Cathedral, a thick rope suddenly drops down. In the next instant, a massive shadow slides down along the rope at astonishing speed. Quasimodo rushes toward the execution ground without hesitation, lets out a roar, and with a swing of his powerful arms knocks down several soldiers in succession. Amid the chaos, he cuts the rope and lifts Esmeralda onto his shoulder. The crowd erupts in panic, retreating in fear of the sudden burst of strength from this so-called monster. He carries Esmeralda like a beast clutching its only treasure, unwilling to let go even if covered in blood. With all his strength, he moves step by step toward the stone stairs, raises Esmeralda high above his head, and shouts in a hoarse voice that echoes through the bell tower. The voice of that so-called monster sounds more like a messenger of God than any knight or saint. The monster becomes a hero, and the bell tower becomes a sanctuary. In his hands, he holds the woman he is willing to protect with his life. Frollo stands alone by the river. He once believed Esmeralda was dead, but when a priest brings her back, he sees her alive again in Notre Dame. Only then does he realize that it was Quasimodo who saved her. Within the towering bell tower, Quasimodo guards Esmeralda like a shadow. He knows he is ugly and strange, repulsive like a monster, so he never dares to approach her, only watching from a distance, silent yet filled with deep affection. But Esmeralda shows not the slightest disgust. After enduring countless curses and injustices, she finally meets someone willing to risk his life for her. Instead, she feels the most sincere gratitude toward this so-called monster, so she walks toward him and softly asks why he saved her. Quasimodo answers that she gave him water, that only she showed him kindness when no one else did, and that he is willing to die for her. He says that she is so beautiful that he has never realized how ugly he himself truly is. Standing beside her, he feels like a beast, like a monster. If you ever need me, just pull this rope, and I will hear the bells. Esmeralda's eyes fill with tears, but Quasimodo does not dare to look at her for long. He loves her and worships her as a goddess in his heart. Yet he knows this feeling is nothing more than an impossible dream. The fact that she is willing to speak to him and smile at him is already the greatest blessing he could ever receive. That day, Esmeralda unexpectedly catches sight of Felipe. She is so overwhelmed with excitement that she can barely stand, and quickly tells Quasimodo that the man is still alive, and that with just one word from him, her innocence can be proven. Quasimodo rushes to the square and begs Felipe to testify for Esmeralda, but Felipe looks at him with cold disgust and says that he can tell her that he will never testify for her, and that she has already caused him too much trouble. At the same time, Frollo continues to pressure her from the shadows. He promises that he can clear Esmeralda's charges, but only if she submits to his desire. When Esmeralda sees the look in his eyes, they are still filled with fear and disgust. Frollo's obsession grows more and more unrestrained in the face of rejection, and he finally tears away his mask of false virtue.
No! Stop me! No!
Fortunately, Quasimodo rushes in, like a furious beast. He stands in front of Esmeralda to protect her. Frollo can only leave in frustration. The days inside Notre Dame Cathedral pass quietly. Every day, Quasimodo takes her to learn the different bells that ring at different hours. He tells her about the direction of the wind blowing from the top of the tower, and how the sunlight filters through the stained glass at certain times. These are the warmest days of Quasimodo's life, days he never dared to hope for, yet truly possesses. High above Notre Dame, they are like two forgotten souls, briefly sharing a fragile peace in a sea of bells. Esmeralda also begins to realize her own naivety. Although she has Quasimodo's protection here, she still longs to breathe the air of freedom. Sure enough, before long, Pierre comes to plead with Frollo to release Esmeralda. He is willing to disguise himself as her in exchange for her freedom, but Frollo refuses, saying that no one is allowed to leave this place. With Esmeralda confined inside Notre Dame, Pierre is left with no solution. In desperation, he turns to the darkest corners of the city. He suppresses his shame and goes to beg the thieves and vagabonds for help. They are the shadows of Paris, people forgotten by the city, but Esmeralda is the light they all share. She has given them bread, given them songs, and given them dignity. Truillefou speaks.
Have the witches of France ever claimed our sister Esmeralda? No! The church has given her safeguard, and now they would take that from her. If the church is sacred, so then is Esmeralda. Yeah! We march!
In an instant, the night erupts. Hundreds upon hundreds of shadows surge toward Notre Dame. At this moment, from atop the cathedral, Quasimodo hears the commotion and is thrown into panic. Looking down from the tower, he sees the crowd flooding in like a rising tide. He has no idea that this is Pierre's rescue, and instead believes they have come to kill Esmeralda. He hides Esmeralda in a secret chamber high above. Outside, the crowd works together to break down the gates. Like a beast driven into a corner, Quasimodo swings massive beams and hurls stones, using all the strength of the bell ringer to fend off every attack. In a moment of carelessness, he accidentally sets the tower ablaze. Flames leap wildly, screams, roars, and the ringing of bells collide as people scatter in terror. Taking advantage of the chaos, Frollo quietly makes his way toward the tower, intending to claim Esmeralda under the cover of firelight. But as he climbs into the hidden chamber, Esmeralda discovers him and flees in panic. She rings the signal agreed upon with Quasimodo. Hearing it, Quasimodo rushes upstairs like an arrow. He lunges forward like a wild beast. Frollo lashes at him mercilessly with a rope. Though Quasimodo possesses immense strength, he cannot bring himself to harm Frollo. Frollo, however, drives a dagger into Quasimodo's back. The two struggle together in the shadows. Quasimodo's strength is overwhelming, but the archdeacon is cunning and ruthless. constantly seeking an opening. Quasimodo only intends to pin Frollo down, but instead, Frollo's body is impaled on an iron spike, killing him instantly. Outside, the king of beggars is struck by a falling beam and loses his life on the spot. At this moment, Pierre finally finds them, and upon seeing that Esmeralda is safe, he lets out a long breath of relief. Soon after, a large force of soldiers storms into Notre Dame. Quasimodo leads the two of them into a hidden passage.
It's a tunnel to the Place de Grève.
Esmeralda suddenly stops, her eyes filled with tears, and gently kisses his cheek, her gesture full of gratitude and warmth. In that instant, Quasimodo feels as if something is lodged in his chest. He slowly lifts his lowered head, and his eyes shine with a quiet light. At that moment, the soldiers break in. Quasimodo drags his exhausted body through the cathedral, running with heavy breaths and labored steps, each climb shaking the stone walls. Suddenly, someone shouts that Frollo's body has been found. His face, twisted with terror and hatred, flickers in the firelight like a shadow of sin nailed in place. Quasimodo knows that no one will believe him, and no one will listen to his explanation. Now that Esmeralda has escaped, he has no reason left to run. The wind howls as he retreats to the edge of the cathedral, the stone gargoyles beside him baring their fangs as if mourning his fate. At the moment the soldiers finally reach the top of the tower, he suddenly becomes still, gently, as if releasing a flower. He lets go of the statue he is holding. His massive figure loses balance in the wind, like a bird with broken wings, like a guardian abandoned by fate. Slowly falling, he finally stops fighting, and also brings an end to his lifelong loneliness. She only gave him a sip of water, but he gave her everything, even his own life. In a world that worships beauty and ignores kindness, the only man who truly loved her is the one everyone calls a monster. Perhaps Quasimodo was never the one who was truly ugly. Perhaps the real ugliness has always been within the crowd.